everyone's enjoying their morning coffee today. Welcome to our podcast, The Coffee Addicts on Modern Technology. Today we'll delve into the complex world of GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. In today's episode we'll explore what GMOs are, the safety concerns associated with them, their impact on farming, and the history behind their development, and so much more. Now let's introduce our guest speakers I'm with today. Here I have Dr. Aiden Farah, an expert in all things chemistry and biology, and Ethan Wu, a project manager at a local architecture firm in California at GDS. And for those tuning in for the first time, I'm Jonathan Pappas, a computer engineer working in Silicon Valley. So how's your guys' day today?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm actually doing really great. I love this weather, this rain. It really reminds me of my hometown, Seattle.
Yeah, I can concur. The sickness has been getting to me a bit, but I think I'm feeling better now. So Ethan, would you like to jump in with the first question?
Alright, so I want to jump right into the definition. What are GMOs?
A GMO, genetically modified organism, is an animal or plant that has been genetically altered using engineering techniques. This technique of modification has been in use for the past thousands of years on crops such as corn and potatoes, as well as on animals such as cattle and dogs.
That seems pretty dangerous. Are there any safety concerns of GMOs, specifically the genetically modified crops?
Although GMOs can bring more variety, they do pose a harm to the human body. Consumption of them can lead to diseases that build up in your body, and these diseases also have immunity to antibiotics. Furthermore, the genetic modifications that are planted can also mix into other organisms, creating an unwanted characteristic. Not much else is known about them, but research still continues.
Wait, what is the difference between GMOs and organic food?
Well, one obvious difference is that the organic food is true to the material, but GMOs are organisms modified for the purpose of defending from external threats. Some crops suffered from climate change, as well as insects, thus we needed GMOs to counter the flaws of the original material.
That's interesting. Because of that, should the government enforce any GMO labeling laws?
Many do believe that the government should enforce labeling laws for GMOs, but by doing so, we will be able to inform consumers about the status of the food they're purchasing, which would provide more transparency in the food system. And yeah.
I heard they're coming up with more regulations. Do you know anything about that through the FDA?
That's a very good question, but I'll explain that later when we touch up on the history of GMOs.
Okay, thanks.
Then the farming industry must take a hit, right?
Well, actually, GMO crops that are tolerant to herbicides help farmers control weeds without damaging the crops. And when farmers use these herbicide-tolerant crops, they don't need to till the soil, which is a practice to get rid of weeds. This no-till planting helps to maintain soil health and lower fuel and labor use.
So anyone can go full Dwight Schrute and start a bee farm right from their home, and then earn profits on overdrive?
Well, if you have the specific documents and credentials, you could make a good business out of GMOs, and you could go full Dwight Schrute, I guess.
I think that's actually wild. This could be a legitimate business which could earn higher profits than others.
Yeah, I agree. Well, breaking away from our conversation for a bit, let's bring our attention to our ad segment by hearing a word from our sponsors.
On the topic of GMOs, our sponsor for this podcast today is Coffeens, a GMO that provides coffee addicts with the caffeine they need at half the price. Coffeens is a genetically modified coffee bean that has the same qualities as a bean from Ethiopia or Guatemala, with more local accessibility. Coffeens Co. have been supplying me with their products since last March. From my experience, the beans have a distinct earthy taste, being so much different from the average coffee at Starbucks or the one you make at home. Personally, I choose the Ethiopian vanilla blend. Having this new advent in my house, which is ready to go in a few minutes, saves me so much time in the morning. Not only is the coffee quick to make, but the quality is above any other coffee I've had. Starting now, Coffeens Co. has an opening promotion with 10% off every order with 2 coffee bags or more. Using code TCACoffee, you can get 2 free bags of hazelnut blend from Ghana at their website, plus an additional 10% discount on their next purchase. I mean, this sounds like a great deal, right?
It definitely does. Okay, so thank you, Ethan, and let's continue on our conversation. What is the history of GMOs, and who's the first person to produce them?
The story of GMOs emerges from around 8000 BCE. Humans started using traditional methods like selective breeding to improve plants and animals, and in 1866, Gregor Mendel, an Austrian monk, studied pea plants and discovers basic genetic principles. And in 1982, FDA approved the first consumer GMO product, which was human insulin produced through genetic engineering, and this was to treat diabetes. And in 1986, the federal government creates a coordinated framework for the regulation of biotechnology, which outlined FDA, EPA, and USDA collaborates to regulate GMO safety. And in 1992, FDA required GMO foods to meet the same safety standards as traditionally bred plants. And finally, in 1994, the first GMO product, which was a tomato, becomes available for sale after federal agencies confirm its safety through studies.
It seems like there's been a lot of work that's been put into like GMOs development and the history of it. So I know there's a few different GMOs such as crops, but I want to get insight on to the specifics on like what are some other examples of GMOs.
Only a few types of GMO crops are grown in the U.S., but some of these GMOs make up a large percentage of the crops grown. For example, soybeans, corn, sugar, beets, canola, and cotton. Most of these GMO plants are used to make ingredients that are then used in other food products.
That sounds really interesting. Is there any methods that like tie to this, specifically through like DNA technology and reproductive cloning?
Two of the most common GMO methods are recombinant DNA technology and reproductive cloning. Recombinant involves using enzymes and lab techniques to manipulate and isolate DNA. This method can combine DNA from different species or create genes with new functions. It's used in crop production to enhance vitamins, sweetness, freshness, and texture. To simplify, it isolates genetic material, cuts DNA, then joins DNA fragments, inserting new DNA into a host cell, and then selecting and screening transformed cells. Meanwhile, reproductive cloning is creating genetically identical individuals. Researchers would take a mature somatic cell, like a skin cell, for example, from the desired animal. They transfer its DNA into an egg cell with its nucleus removed, creating a clone. In the simple terms, the process is taking somatic cell from a desired animal, transferring its DNA into an egg cell, and then removing the nucleus from the egg cell.
I actually have a question focused more on the economic side of things. Do you think that GMOs are sustainable for humanity in the long run? Like, will this be implemented into our food sources?
Honest opinion, I do believe that GMOs will be sustainable for the future. As mentioned before, they do have negative impacts on humans, but we could still discover more about them. Like, we can find a way to eradicate these features and hopefully implement them into our society. And there's also many opportunities that can still be yielded by GMOs. So yeah.
Expanding on that, what are the common uses and byproducts of GMOs?
Common uses of GMOs are in crop plants, farm animals, and soil bacteria, which are some of the common uses that allow more nutritious plants or food, for example. And then disease and drought-resistant plants that require fewer environmental resources, such as water and fertilizer. And this also would promote less use of pesticides.
Back to what Ethan was saying earlier, is it cheaper to sell and produce GMO products compared to just farming organic crops?
Well, for that fact, this would lead to an increased supply of food, but also with a reduced cost. And this also means more faster growing plants and animals. There's there's much more that could be yielded by GMOs.
Thank you. So I think the ultimate question is, should we keep promoting and continue using this form of biotechnology? Personally, I think we should, just based on its several benefits, and also not just in crops, but like saving lives through medicine. And I hopefully like in the future they will integrate like more vitamins and natural products in the production of it, so it's not entirely just genetically modified.
In my opinion, based on what I've learned so far, I think promoting and continuing this use of biotechnology is essential for humanity. I mean, if we consider other factors like droughts, fires, and just disease taking out our crops, we need to be able to have a backup plan for these crops. And as a substitute, and a great substitute, I think, these GMO crops or anything other than crops, I think provides like a really nice source that could possibly save humanity. And on top of that, we also have a additional source of revenue for smaller businesses or just big corporations. I mean, some people might argue that it's not safe or like it's just not what people want. But I mean, I think if more research showing that it's viable and good for humans, I think we can actually start something big here.
As mentioned earlier, I do think that we should continue. There's a lot of things that GMOs could provide us. We could eradicate problems that exist today, and we could also find out more potential for GMOs.
Yeah, some interesting points that you brought on us today. Well, anyway, thank you for tuning into our podcast on GMOs, and thank you, obviously, Dr. Farah, for coming to our show today. I hope you had an interesting time as much as we did, and learned about all of the discoveries of GMOs.
Why, yes, I did enjoy this podcast, and I'll definitely be using that promo code for coffee beans. And I also did enjoy the analogies our fellow commentator made about the GMOs. I found that quite interesting, to say the least.
Most definitely. Well, we hope this episode has provided some valuable insights into the science, controversies, and implications surrounding genetically modified organisms. Join us next time as we explore the ethics of designer babies. Until then, have fun brewing.